This is Tom Bain, and this is Wine, Money, and Song. If you find the content of this channel of interest, please subscribe. And if you have like-minded friends who are interested in wine, please tell them about it. And in comments, please let us know what subjects you would like us to cover and if there's wines you want us to react to.
Come along with me to the wine country, and here in the vineyards you will see how we Gallo folks take loving care to make our wines with flavor rare. Gallo makes wine with loving care. Gallo makes wine with loving care. Gallo makes wine with loving care, especially for you.
Ernest and Julio Gallo, heroes or villains? Why do I say that? Well, a lot of people, when they hear the word Ernest and Julio Gallo, they think of cheap ghetto wines of Thunderbird and Night Train. And they did sell millions of cases of those wines. They found a formula to flavor wines, and it pleased the American taste on certain levels. They also did Boone's Farm apple and strawberry back in the 70s, and every college kid would be drinking that. But let's go to today and see the scope of their business, and we'll retrace their steps on how they got there. So today, Gallo has over 30% of market share of the American wine market, and they buy over 2/3 of the grapes grown in California. That's huge. And they did that over a period of 1960s and 70s. They started using the profits from those popular wines and started plowing it into high quality grapes. And they signed long-term contracts with grape growers. And then they started acquiring new wineries, and they have over 100 brands. You're gonna see them scrolling on your screen. And I don't know if the word is impressive, but is extensive. And there's spirit companies there, there's fine wineries there, expensive wines, cheap wines, but they still control the lower end of the market under $10, and that's through supermarket sales. And the one thing that they did do to increase awareness of wines is they spent millions of dollars on advertising, and no one had done that to this part. So they brought the audience the wines, and they knew about them and put it in their heads, and they were ready to buy them. Just so you're aware, back in the late 70s, I worked several years for Gallo Wine Distributors in New York. I worked for the Taub family, and I must say, I was a marketing student, and boy did I learn the first week working for Gallo. I learned more than I learned the 4 years of marketing, and nothing was left for chance with Gallo. And the other thing that they were great at was sales. Very few companies are good at both, but Gallo was incredible. So I can only say that I learned so much working for them, and to this day I still keep those ethics and those rules that I learned in salesmanship that I learned from them. But let's get to their history and how they got there. Before I go into the history of Ernest and Julio Gallo Winery, first I wanted to identify what Ernest did and what Julio did. Ernest was the businessman, very hard-nosed, even considered to be small-time hit guy. He was always on top of you, very intense, very sales-driven, hard-nosed. Maybe that's the best word. Hard-nosed guy, and he didn't take no for an answer. And I know when he negotiated advertising campaigns, he was brutal to the PR advertising firms, while Julio was the winemaker, and all he wanted to do was make the best wines he could. So that's their two personalities. So the way they began, Ernest and Julio's father sold grapes that he grown, and he was selling grapes. And his uncle was in the business too during Prohibition. Now, there's a lot of rumors that they were involved with very unlawful acts during Prohibition, making wine and selling wine. And right near the end of Prohibition, their father was murdered, or not murdered, people, and the mother was also murdered. They called it a murder-suicide, but a lot of people think it was a mob hit. I don't know. There's a book called Gallo Be Thy Name. Look that up if you're more interested in it, but I don't like to go into that end of it. So let's go. So they were in Prohibition, and the uncle, by the way, I think it was Michael, he was considered the Al Capone of California at the time during Prohibition. Very, very tough guy. But once Prohibition stopped in 1933, Gallo opened up their own winery, and they started making wines and selling the wines to clients and also other wineries. But they did not have a label of their own. They did not sell their wines directly. And the reason for that, there was basically no market yet, that it took a long time to rebuild the wine market. So they just made bulk wines, and that was during the Great Depression. So it was very, very hard starting a new business during the Great Depression. And in 1941, Gallo started their own label, and they started selling their wines to the public. And they made wines mainly for the European, Italian people who love to have their wines every night, a glass, and they made full-bodied red wines and a little mellow wines. But they also, years later, started making wines that suited the tastes of America. And Americans didn't like their wines dry. They liked it with a little sweetness to it. So that's where Boone's Farm came in. That's where Andre came in. Andre, they sold millions of cases of Andre Champagne. And it was a Charmet bulk processed fermented champagne that kind of tasted like ginger ale. It was a little sweet, and most people's first champagne they ever had was Andre. And they did millions and millions of cases of those wines. And later on, they did Wild Vines, and these were flavored wines. Like I said, Night Train, Thunderbird, Boone's Farm, they're all flavored to have a sweetness, and people... The first wines that they had in college were those wines that were easy to drink and you can knock back. And then later on, they got more sophisticated. So what Gallo did with the money that they made from those big brands is they invested heavily in Sonoma, and they bought a lot of land, and they buy a lot of grapes. And Julio Gallo worked with the University of California at Davis on technology and winemaking and wine growing research. And the one thing that Gallo was at the top was their quality control, that they made their wines basically without flaws. And they really concentrated on high quality. I can tell you when I worked for Gallo, and if something went wrong with a batch of wine, like it didn't go through the final cold stabilization and it started throwing sediment on the shelf, in 2 hours we called every customer who had it, and we had a truck there picking it up and replacing it with new fine merchandise. So they were really key on that. So for decades they built up their arsenal of fine wines, and then they started to make joint ventures with other companies being marketing end. They went into the spirits end, and you saw when we rolled those 100 brands, they're in every part of the market, low to high, and they helped create a wine culture in America where wine was on the table. And they did a great job when they came out with their line of varietal wines. And you're going to see a 30-second commercial on on those varietal wines when they came out. And when they came out with that line of varietal wines, it increased the sales of varietal wines by 300% just by loading the distribution channels. Tripled the supply of varietal wines and sales.
Sauvignon Blanc, Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon. To all those who are coming home, and those we come home to, from Ernest and Julio Gallo, all the best.
People want it, you got to give it to them, so they gave it to them. They made the money, they plowed it back into premium grape growing and branching out to other countries. They have the marketing rights to a number of very, very good wineries from Europe and so on and so forth. But all in all, I see them as heroes. I see them as heroes because they put wine on the table in America. And it took them many years, millions and millions of dollars, but they paved the way for everyone else. They paved the way for Mondavi. They paved the way for everyone else in the wine business. They did the real hard work, and I consider them to be the wine pioneers in America.